welcome. Thanks for joining us for Jumpstart's quarterly State of AI webinar. I'm Lauren Smith-Petta, and I serve as Jumpstart's Director of Education. With the landscape of AI in such a rapidly evolving state, these quarterly sessions are focused on the highlights and headlines of AI, what you need to know in 30 minutes, and how to successfully and ethically apply these tools to your businesses today. Jumpstart offers another webinar series on a different topic every month, along with a variety of other educational programs and events. Visit jumpstartinc.org/smallbiz to explore our services. Before I introduce our presenter today, a few housekeeping items. This presentation session is a mere 30 minutes. Another 30 minutes will be set aside for the Q&A portion. In your toolbar, you should be able to see an important communication tool at your disposal today, the Q&A. You can put your questions in the Q&A as they occur to you, and Brad will address them when appropriate or at the end. Also at the end of today's session and in a follow-up email, you'll receive a brief survey. We appreciate your feedback. It allows us to continue to bring in experts to teach valuable lessons and to make them even better every single time. All right, without further ado, allow me to introduce our esteemed AI expert, Bradley Reynolds. Bradley is a recognized leader in the AI industry with a deep understanding of the transformative power of large language models and generative AI. As the Senior Vice President of Artificial Intelligence at Expedient, Bradley spearheads efforts to simplify the deployment of private AI for enterprises. So as always, I can promise you're learning from the expert today. Welcome back, Brad.
Thanks, Laurie. Okay, well, welcome everyone to, it's probably like the fifth or the sixth one of these that we've done. So I'm kind of going to go over the state of AI, maybe this year, or maybe since our last conversation in February, give you some updates on some of the trends, and then maybe where you should be focusing your efforts in terms of maximizing the value you can get out of it and some of the kind of basic blocking and tackling that you need. So going over kind of some background trends and stats and stuff that seems to be at the forefront of how things are evolving. I wanted to pop really quickly into some of the stuff that's going on with OpenAI, and specifically wanted to chat about the trends that is showing. Just because they're the market leader, it kind of shows how some of the things are evolving in terms of AI and how we can all take advantage of it. So I think 2 days ago, very nascent. Oh, and before I start into this, I'm happy to answer questions in chat or in terms of Q&A as we go through the presentation. Don't feel like you have to hold it for the end. If there's a slide that you want to drill into or have questions, I'm happy to kind of answer those things. But we'll start here with OpenAI. They released a new model, and so that's kind of the term of the thing that exists behind the scenes of Chat GPT. So when you're in there asking it questions, it goes through a model. So think of the model as the brain that processes all of your information and gives you the answers. So essentially the intelligence. And they introduced something 2 days ago called GPT-4o, and O meaning omni. And so omni meaning, as they describe it here, a multimodal chat that's kind of we'll call it a stair-step evolution on GPT-4, which was their previous best-of-breed model. It has a pretty big, what they call context window. So this is all the stuff you can cut and paste into chat, upload documents, add images that it can kind of take back in and process to be able to kind of answer your questions. And I think one of the more exciting pieces of this is that it's available for free to anyone that's a Chat GPT user. I haven't validated that particular point yet because I'm a paid subscriber, so it is available to me. But the supposed thing is like, now something that in GPT-4 cost you $20 a month for an enterprise license, when you log in, you should be able to have access to this. And the context window is actually a pretty exciting thing. in terms of it allows you to, I think 128K could let you upload most books that are out there in text form, or uploading spreadsheets and all kinds of interesting things that, have large amounts of data that you want to ask questions about. So that's a pretty big release. And the fact that they've made it relatively accessible in terms of the pricing, free to anyone, it kind of behooves you to use the best and brightest models that are out there, and for them to allow that to happen to you as just an individual non-paid user is a pretty big boon. The numbers that are shown below here are more for developers. Like if you're building an application on top of it, there is a kind of a cost model. I'm going to go into some of the trending around that type of stuff that's happened in the last, call it 12 months. So the freeness, huge boon. Everybody should be able to use the best model out there and kind of experiment with it. But wanted to kind of show you how fast things are evolving from an economic perspective. So this concept of token is, for a simplistic thing, just the words that you put into the AI system. And there essentially is a computational cost per word that you use. And, I guess folks that have been in the technology sphere, you've heard of things like Moore's Law in terms of how the processing power of CPUs get cheaper and cheaper, or more powerful over time as you can load them up further. And so we have all, as with the evolution of kind of computational power, have seen things get much faster and much cheaper. But this AI stuff, with using tokens as the kind of atomic factor in terms of computation, have been getting much, much, much cheaper. So I threw out a few stats in here in terms of the previous older generation model, GPT-3.5, and also GPT-4, which was the previous state of the art, and now GPT-4 Omni or O, in terms of how much more cost effective these are being. And this cost effectiveness isn't necessarily visible to an end user of ChatGPT, because prior to the last couple of days, you just paid $20 a month for an enterprise license and you got access to GPT-4. But for somebody who's developing applications on top of the OpenAI infrastructure for kind of whatever your particular use cases or interests are, you see humongous decreases in cost over the last year. And so this is a trend that I don't see decreasing. I don't know if it's going to be linearly scaling down, or it's actually going to be kind of exponentially scaling down. So, but the notion is that it's going to get significantly cheaper for us to use AI at scale. I think that's just a great thing for companies looking to build stuff on top of AI. It's great for users of AI. It decreases barriers to entry and makes it a lot more ability to build kind of ubiquitous things. But the other kind of component on the side of this is this concept of a context window. So this is a technical jargon term. What it means is how much stuff you can dump at these AI models to have them reason with. So if you said, hey, I can give it 3 paragraphs of text and ask it something and then have it come back, great. That's a relatively small context window, because 3 paragraphs of text, say it's like 500 or 1,000 words. But the current state of the art with OpenAI has gone from some of the earlier models where you could put in, say, 4,000 words, to now the current ones allow you to put in 128,000 words. And these could be words in terms of like uploading spreadsheets, uploading Word docs, just cutting and pasting things in. But the some of the other models that are out but not necessarily publicly accessible with Gemini, and Gemini's Google's models, they have context windows in the 1 million to 10 million range. So think about the entire works of Shakespeare might be about 6 million words, I think. So, you're now opening up the possibilities of what these engines can reason on for you. And so if you think about something like a business application where you might want to upload P&Ls from the last 8 years and then say, hey, show me the trends for this market versus this market, or whatever your particular use case is, the limiting factor used to be what you could upload. And so you'd have to do things in kind of small incremental batches. Now it's kind of like, take that set of data that you have, whether you're uploading it directly yourself or you're using an API and building an application. This is no longer a significant limit. And towards the bottom of this, there's also research models that are out there that have figured out ways to allow you to essentially upload infinite amounts of data and have it kind of process off of it. So as we're evolving our ability to use AI, one of the real power points long-term is, how do I use a ton of data that I might have at a corporation and upload it into the system so that it can kind of make sense and I can ask it a lot of questions and what if statements and all that type of stuff. So on one side, you have the ability to compute with AI much cheaper. And that was the previous slide in terms of the cost per token or the cost per word. On the other side, you can throw a ton more words into it. Obviously, if you're paying by the word, you can't, it's very expensive to throw millions and millions of words in. But both of those things are kind of, one side is increasing, as you can see, exponentially in terms of the context window, and the cost side is decreasing exponentially. So the amount of applications and the amount of data that you can feed into AI is trending in a very positive way for either application developers or end users. So that combination, I think, is very valuable for all of us as consumers of AI, and it opens up the world for tons of applications that in the early phases were limited by the fact you had really small amounts of data that you can kind of interact with. So that's a big macroeconomic trend, and I don't see it decreasing. The only question would be, how much will prices decrease over time and how much will context windows increase over time? But essentially, from a context window side, it's likely to be infinite. You'll only be limited by the amount of tokens you want to, or the amount of words that you want to pay for. We also have really strong competition going on. So while a lot of folks focus on OpenAI and ChatGPT as a primary vehicle of how we access AI tools, we have some significant competition from Anthropic, who's a competitor to OpenAI, Google, who's coming up with a whole bunch of different models, both closed and open source. But then two particular ones, Meta, which is Facebook's kind of parent company, a huge investment in open source AI. So when you use something from OpenAI, you're using their closed source models. So essentially, you don't have direct access to the AI. You have access to either an API interface or a chat front end, and that is controlled by them. Meta and another relatively new entrant startup out of France called Mistral, they've taken a different tack. And if we remember back in maybe the computer, server software area, you had open source systems like Red Hat and all the different kind of Linux, Unisys. And on the closed source side, you had things like Microsoft Windows and, IBM's AIX and all of that type of stuff. So the notion is in terms of AI, we don't know which of these approaches is going to necessarily provide the most benefit. And I think the reality is that these approaches are going to be not necessarily symbiotic, but will just fill different use cases. So the cool thing with Meta and Mistral, Meta being obviously highly backed in terms of financing, Mistral being a smaller company, but relatively well-financed, is any of us that are application developers can go download those models and customize them ourselves and host them ourselves. So you're not beholden at that point to one of the larger providers. You can kind of build your own, experiment on your own, and have full control over the system. And Meta's most recent model, it's called the Llama 3 group of models. They spent something on the order of $100 million in training time on all those GPU clusters to build that. And then they're just offering it for the industry or any hobbyist experimenter to download and change and modify however they want. So this interesting bifurcation that's kind of happening in terms of the industry, and it's fostering a lot of competition because some of the things that you can do with Meta models or Mistral models actually can outperform the OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google models. They just might be very niche in terms of their expertise. So it's creating this very interesting stew of capabilities. Microsoft is in the game as well, but they're taking a very interesting tack in terms of they have their proprietary models because they own 49% of OpenAI, and that's the stuff that you can access through Azure, but they also are financing open source models. So they're kind of trying to straddle a lot of the different possibilities. And it seems like they're just hedging a lot of bets because at the end of the day, Microsoft isn't an AI company. They're very much an enterprise business focused company. And so the bets that they're making, they're taking a look at them as like, okay, well, whether it's closed source or open source or a partnership deal we have, we want our clients to have the best kind of business outcome. And so it's interesting to see where they put their bets. And then there's a last one, which we'll talk about a little bit later, called Perplexity, which isn't a model builder. They're not building this kind of AI brain power, but they're taking the semantic web, the things that we would search for through Google, and turning it into a database that's very AI friendly, so that when you have these AI models on one side, you can access up-to-date data very easily. Kind of like think of it as a super web browser on steroids. And so that competitive aspect starts to get a lot of value out of AI because you can, on one side, have the brain power, but on the other side, have the contextual up-to-date information. So lots of cool investment, lots of interesting companies, and lots of deep pockets putting their ways. All of these are strong participants in the industry. But kind of on a very basic level, there's the question is okay, great. Well, we have all these competitors and all these models and all these kind of philosophies of how they're doing things, but how do I get value today out of AI? And it's really simple. It's trying to integrate AI chat. So whether you're using Chat GPT or I have a couple of other things I'm going to mention later, it's trying to integrate that into daily habits and thinking about AI first as opposed to thinking about search first or just manually doing things. And there's a study that I mentioned in one of the previous Jumpstart State of AIs that BCG did, where they gave 10% of their workforce access to Chat GPT-4 and said, use it for your day-to-day. So what does BCG do? They're a big consulting group. They're building out PowerPoints and presentations. They're writing client emails. They're doing data analysis. They're building out, Excel spreadsheets, those types of things. It's a huge increase in productivity, quality of output by adding just the basic tools. And so if you haven't started at that block, that's kind of like the crawl phase. You want to start out figuring out how to use these tools natively as a habit. But the reality is it's a new habit. It's like, signing up for a gym membership is one thing, but going to the gym 4 days a week on a plan consistently just takes a while to start a new habit when you're used to doing things in a different fashion. So this is, the BCG stuff shows that there's a huge kind of swell of value that you can get out of implementing just basic AI chat tools with nothing else. But on the kind of flip side here, we're looking at the Salesforce unapproved use of AI, a study. So this is a study that came out since the last time that we did a get together. And the interesting piece here is that towards the BCG study example, like everybody's using AI inside of corporations. So before the Salesforce study came out, the question was, hey, I get people are using AI tools. Our company doesn't necessarily have an approved AI tool. We don't have AI integrated inside of our company, but it's probably onesie, twosie, 5% of our company's using it. It's not true. This is a study of over 14,000 end users, and the stats are kind of staggering. So just say 50% of people are using AI inside of a business. So if you're thinking about it as a business owner or somebody who's responsible kind of from the compliance and capability side of the business, the cat's out of the bag. So now it's like, okay, do we want to just kind of continue in this? Some of you use the term bring your own AI type scenario, or do we want to start building wrappers and controls around it so that as a company, you could put a governance and structure around what's going on with AI? But to me, this was eye-opening because it's like, okay, if I'm responsible for a business and compliance and policy, can I ignore this? And it's at the point, we call it shadow AI, but it's at the point where you can't ignore it. And so do you just let it go the way that it's at? Or do you look at, are there ways to have tools inside that we can offer the same upside of the BCG study? And obviously the upside is there. Otherwise, 50% of your employees wouldn't be using it currently. But can we do that in a more responsible and controlled fashion? So for me, eye-opening kind of trend and stat in terms of the study. But there's some other kind of information out there, and Gartner has this thing called a hype cycle. And so when any new technology comes out, they take this concept of initial exuberance, peak, valley, and then kind of the normalization aspect. So for any technology, they have this hype cycle. For generative AI, they've come and put the particular note points along the cycle. But I don't know about anybody else on the call, but I live in the AI world 24/7. I'm feeling the fatigue side. And the fatigue side comes in because you've heard all of these things about, hey, AI is going to change the world, and here's all the possibilities of AI. And not a lot of people are realizing that value. And the reason that they're not realizing the value as from an organizational perspective is because they don't have like a coherent strategy of how to kind of build from the possibilities of AI to what are the baby steps, what's kind of the crawl, walk, run around. So I'm feeling in my conversations with folks a lot of fatigue around the hype versus what's being delivered. And that's when it's a good time to kind of retrench into what's possible. And the best kind of metaphor or analogy that I've found is this whole kind of, I want to climb Mount Everest program. And so the great thing about generative AI is that when ChatGPT came out in November of 2022, everybody could see the possibilities. This notion I can interact with this system and it can kind of reason and accumulate information to be able to put on the output. But to be able to kind of leverage that to strategically increase the value of your business or increase the efficiencies of your business, it's like climbing Everest. And so the problem is with ChatGPT coming out is that you could see the pinnacle of possibilities, but there's a lot of steps that need to be taken that it seems daunting. I mean, this is in the mid 2000s, a lot of TV shows came out about climbing Everest. A lot of people got excited about doing it, but man, when you see how difficult that thing is, and AI is similarly difficult to kind of implement at scale, the worry point relative to say like that generative AI peak and valley is that do you get caught in the kind of trough of despair where you just want to sit on your hands and figure out, like, hey, I need to see some more results or some more use cases to kind of build it out. So that's the question, is kind of, what's the program? So if you're going to go climb a giant mountain like Everest, you have to have a training program, a nutrition program. You got to climb small things. Even when you get to the mountain, you have to acclimate a base camp and then have a progression of camps on your way up. There's all kinds of of difficulties that you have to accomplish to be able to get there. So the question is, how do you end up winning with it? And so, my philosophy, I guess, in anything, but relative to AI, is to really just take a basics approach. It's like crawl, walk, run, try and do the basic kind of training before you even go out to some tester mountains that you can walk up, before you go to bigger mountains, before you're ready for a challenge of kind of getting to the summit of unlocking the real value of AI over time. And so a couple of the points we'll be touching on here is, you want to keep your options open. You want to try and empower everybody. And this is like employees, spouses, kids, like how can we get everybody to have access to the basic technology? Another notion that's gotten hotter over time, and you could see in the GPT-4o, is this kind of multimodality capability, and the notion of untraining a habit and training a new habit, which is untraining I'm going to ask Google for a search answer and think about how can I interact with AI primarily through a chat interface, and start to train myself to think about it first. Myself personally, I'm pretty much there now, but it's taken like a year. And it's really thinking like, okay, I have this question. Why am I going to ask Google first? Why am I not going to ask AI first? We'll touch into some of that a little bit later. But keeping the options open, I see this kind of dating myself, but going back to when internet was first taking off and all the different search engines and browsers, and how are you going to use it and what are you going to use it for? There are just so many options out there that I think were confusing to people. And so a lot of folks just didn't start, or they started with something that wasn't really highly performant, and they had to figure out how to kind of go past there. And also, in terms of the options, OpenAI, which is the leader that we talked about earlier, last November, they almost went under or went into some significantly different form because of conflict that happened in their board of directors. They fired the CEO, they brought back the CEO. The co-founder was against the CEO and then came back and apologized. This is Ilya, who is the co-founder. And so there's just a lot of variability in the kind of AI ecosystem. And so the notion of keeping your options open is the notion of not putting all of your eggs in one basket being OpenAI, or one basket being Microsoft, or one basket being Anthropic. And the funny thing is, last night I got the note that guy, the co-founder of OpenAI, just resigned because he wanted to do something else. So lots of moves happening all of the time, people wanting to work on a passion project versus a business project. And the underpinning of his was that OpenAI is kind of going in a direction that's very business focused. And he wanted to be more on the I want to change the world focus. And so those are big changes. So like, how do you keep your options open? I wanted to bring up a particular tool called Po, and I've used this, and I use other chat tools too. But the notion of having a chat tool that you can use that accesses all of the other AI tools on the back end, both individually and potentially in concert by combining them together. So this notion of, hey, well, maybe if OpenAI is not great at this, Anthropic's great at this, or Gemini's great at this, or for instance, if, like towards the context window thing at the beginning, if I have a really big document, if I'm using an interface that essentially lets me multitask or multi-home capabilities between a bunch of different models, it gives you an insulation against the changes that happen. If OpenAI went away tomorrow and you're using an interface like Po, well, your Chat GPT wouldn't work, but Po has access to all of the other kind of providers and models that are out there to allow you to kind of continue to function. Another kind of concept of keeping your options open or not is Microsoft finally released their Copilot. And Copilot is interesting in terms of it integrates AI directly into the Microsoft application suite, which seems extremely attractive. I have it myself. I don't really end up using it too much. I just kind of find it clunky. But the counterpoint to Copilot, first of all, it's expensive, like it's $30 a user a month. But the other counterpoint is you're locked into the Microsoft ecosystem. The Microsoft ecosystem is primarily locked into OpenAI. So things like issues at OpenAI or how the system actually functions on the back end, you don't really have direct control over. So Copilot in of itself is interesting, but there's this whole concept out there of platforms versus applications. So if you look at it's kind of more of a platform. It gives you access to a bunch of AI applications. Copilot is something that's giving you access to kind of integrated AI inside of certain applications. And so I would say that kind of single point of access, multiple possibilities on the outside is probably a better bet right now, because it's really hard to place, almost like super high risk angel investing. You have to put a ton of different bets on small things and see which ones are the ones that pay off. So if you're going to pick a system or a platform, something like a Poe might be a lot better than a Chat GPT, because it can use the functionalities of Chat GPT. But at the end of the day, towards the Everest analogy or the trough of despair in terms of the Gartner hype cycle, the key is just kind of taking the Nike motto and just doing it. You have to figure out how to kind of add that stuff in. So another kind of key point is looking for ways to empower everyone in your life. So to become a champion of it, not only to use it yourself and learn it, but figure out how you can kind of broaden that capability. And you'll find out that, some of the best users are kids. So at home, I have a personal Chat GPT account, and we, I give it to the kids and my wife, and, I use it for my own personal stuff, and I have my work stuff there. But I'll pop in and see my chat history, and I'll be like, well, what are these chats that are going on? And there'll be chats about how do I code things for Roblox, or how do I edit my YouTube videos for my YouTube channel better, or creating silly images that are Fortnite and puppy. There's a lot of puppies going on at home right now. And so I taught the kids how to use it very lightly, but basically gave them the ability to use it when they want. And so they're just creating stuff on their own. And so we think about that as, how do we get the most benefit out of the AI systems, starting out with the basic blocks. So in this case, it's ChatGPT, but showing others how to use it. And I think it really kind of pops into the importance of, this isn't just a technology, but it's kind of something that solves some base emotional issues, or confronts base emotional issues for humans. And it's not just readily apparent how to use it. So the notion of, it's fine to give somebody the tool, but you also have to give them a bit of instruction of how to use it. So if you have a screwdriver, a chisel, a hammer, you have to give some level of instruction and some level of feedback. So my kids will play with it and then come back to me, be like, how do I do this? Hey, AI generated this code for Roblox. It doesn't work. Why is that? And so we can then have a dialogue about how to kind of iterate our conversations to get to where they want. So you can see, even in this case, he asked it to generate an image. It came back, it wasn't quite the image, or it had some questions. He answered the question. He kind of got to the end state. So that notion of empowering everybody is key. And here's just a stat kind of from within our organization, Expedient. We have an internal chat tool that everybody has access to. We have 400 employees of kind of all different business areas. And we have about 100 in the last 30 days, 160 people that have used it. So what are our options? Hey, we want to try and empower more people. How do we do that? We're going to be doing more internal engagement. So lunch and learns and kind of the stuff that we're doing now, but diving into maybe for a department, hey, for HR, for sales, for marketing, here's some best practices of how to use it. So it's not enough just to give the tool, but to to look at it, measure it, see how we're using it, and see what kind of ways that we have to improve. But I pulled the Johnny Appleseed graphic because it's kind of that same thing. We're out there, the folks that are really into it, you can be Johnny Appleseed, whether it's to the kids or whether it's to employees, but that's a secondary part of it. It's just not enough to give the front end, but it's kind of, you want to leverage it out past that. Also, the multimodal features are becoming quite excellent. I'll give one example. I needed to drill a hole in something this weekend, and the piece was like stuck. And so I couldn't figure out how to undo it. I started to force it. And I'm like, I'm going to destroy this thing. But I know what it is and what it can do, but I don't know what its name is. So I just took a picture of it and said, what is this? And how do I get the top part unstuck? And it identified it. It knew what the color was. And it told me there's stuff that I didn't have in this, but it told me essentially how to get it unstuck. Maybe something that I would have figured out on my own, but I could have also broken it. But that notion of, hey, I just took a picture of something, asked it what it was, uploaded to Chat GPT with a little question, and it gave me the full answer. It's a very lightweight example of multimodality, but it worked really well. And it even knew the color of what was going on. So that's coming, not coming. It's here, and it's getting even better. And I had great success with it over the weekend. So untraining the search mode, we're all used to this. And, it took me more than a year to untrain it. But the thing that I was still using, or still am using Google for, is when I need kind of up-to-date information, or maybe I need like product reviews, which earbuds are the best earbuds out in the market. Google is better for that right now, because these AI models we interact with have like a cutoff of knowledge, and they're not good for specific niche kind of comparison information. But there's some interesting things coming down the pike here of using this company called Perplexity. So if you haven't heard about it, good to check out. They're not a model builder, but what they're doing is they're taking the entire semantic web that we have, so the stuff that Google's indexing, and turning it into a format that's really easily accessible for AI applications. And so what this does, in continually updating it, but that whole concept of converting those kind of flat, static web pages into a format that's easy for AI applications to access, lets AI applications now be aware of what's going on now. So you think about the AI application, that's like the OpenAI GPT-4 model. It knows data through October of 2023. What if I want the Guardian score from yesterday? Doesn't know it. But if you marry these two parts, and the way that it had been previously done was an AI application would go and grab what it thinks is the best match top web page, pull that back, process it, and then answer. What Perplexity allows you to do is it is the entire index of the internet, and the AI application asks the question of like, what was the Guardian score yesterday? And it's able to find the right contextual information in a much more efficient and much higher likelihood of semantic match than what Google would directly return. So now you're able to marry kind of the knowledge that exists out on the web, as well as timely information, with the AI brain. So the AI brain is going to take that box score or whatever comes back about the Guardians game and put it in a human readable format for you. So this is still relatively nascent, but you can check out Perplexity yourself. Super cool. And it's going to revolutionize the web, because the web will still exist. People will still be writing box scores and blog posts and all that kind of stuff. But the way you access the web isn't going to be through the Google Search Console. It's going to be by asking AI applications that are natively plugged in to AI-enabled versions of the web. And so super cool, lots of interesting research going on there, but this is real right now. Google's trying to do the same thing too. But that notion of AI not being able to answer like up-to-date information is gone. Like it's doable now. It just won't be able to answer it directly inside of the model. So super exciting stuff that's coming down the pike into applications. So just to recap, how do you end up on the winning side? Keeping your options open, making sure you're not just going all in on one particular vendor or particular application, trying to get everyone empowered with AI tools, and the basic tool being a basic chat. And this is, people in your family, people at work, and yourself. But the wider that gets, the better knowledge kind of spins up and accretes. Understanding the notion that AI now isn't just a text answer system. You can upload graphics, video, movies, and have it start to do things and ask questions about it. And then the notion, I guess, at the end of, untraining ourselves or retraining ourselves to think, especially now that AI can be married to up-to-date information, that I want to use this as my primary vehicle to ask questions. And not only just ask questions for answers, but have dialogues. So when the answers come back and it's like, that isn't exactly what I want, the notion that I can have a conversation with it, and a conversation that can be multimodal. So that's kind of the kind of core pieces of how you end up on the winning side of AI currently. And to a kind of a typical finalizing slide, this is the worst AI you'll ever use, but I've added in and the most expensive. So the cost will continue to drive down in the same way we've seen the cost of PCs and computers go down over time. So by becoming more economical, it will enable a lot more applications and a lot more ubiquitous use of the best AI. And that's the key, is the free AI isn't necessarily the ones you want to be using. You want to be using the best. And prior to GPT-4o, that was costly. Now GPT-4o is free, at least for the time being, and it's time to kind of embrace that. Wanted to also shout out to the Marketing AI Institute on a couple of things. One, they're having a networking get together on June 6th. It's open to anybody, but it is through Eventbrite. So you need to, there's a QR code there, but you can also look up Marketing AI Institute. And it's just, I'm attending, a bunch of local AI folks are attending, and Paul Reitzer and Kathy McPhillips that are at the AI Institute are awesome supporters of AI and have been in the industry for 10 years plus with all of their podcasts and stuff. It would be a great event. It's free. It'll just be a good networking, and you can kind of ask deep questions. They also have a podcast, a weekly podcast that Paul and his partner Mike do on kind of the state of AI, what's going on this week. It's very informative, and that I think they're up to over 100 episodes at this point. They're also pivoting it to be more of an AI general podcast. So it's, as opposed to just a marketing specific podcast. So highly encourage you to attend this event if you can. I'll be there and happy to chat about kind of any AI stuff in detail. So I want to thank you for the time to present. There's another QR code here for the AI Success Kit. So this is something that we put together at Expedient. That's not Expedient branded stuff. It's more of like links and resources and newsletters and all kinds of stuff that you can download, use cases, policies, all AI policies, all kinds of stuff. So basically it's just a bunch of information that you can use to educate yourself, as well as courses that you can take and all those types of things. So I'd like to open it up if anybody had any questions. And I saw there was one in there about GPT-4o. And I'm going to pop back from the Success Kit to the next event coming up. And I hope to see some of you folks there. So I saw Ari had a question about, it's not how to use GPT-4o in the free version. Follow the links. It kept showing GPT-3.5. It might be for free folks that they're rolling it out in phases. I know because I had the paid version, it was just on my drop down, like I could choose 4.0, 4, or 3.5. So it might just be a slow rollout thing. But they said on their webpage that it's open, free to any Chat GPT user. and they didn't say any paid ChatGPT users. So it's not there. Might be something that, so you said the dropdown doesn't show 4.0. My guess is it might be a phased rollout. Anytime they've rolled out a new technology, it's tended to be in small batches, probably so that they validate that the system's performing, all that kind of stuff. So I've seen it. I expect it would probably be rolled out in the next week to everybody. And if not, there'll probably be some web posts about why it is or why it isn't. But so they say it'll be rolled out to everybody. And it's powerful and has a big context window. So thanks for that. So we had a couple QAs. Okay, so could you go into more depth on how you personally use Poe or how you think it could be used optimally? So in terms of how I personally use it, I started using it before ChatGPT had a very large context window. And so what I use is like Anthropic is a competitor to OpenAI that has a really big context window. That was like one of their first things. So I would take, if I needed to upload like 20 spreadsheets and have it do correlations between them, I would use it for that type of stuff. Additionally, like if, for instance, when you're in marketing and you do graphics creation, so OpenAI has DALL-E 3, but there's another graphics creation suite called Midjourney. And so you can, like, if you want to use Midjourney, you just flip the switch, say, I want to use Midjourney. Cool. And I happen to like Midjourney more than I like DALL-E 3. And who knows if there's another graphics thing that's going to come out that's much better later. So the notion is I could kind of select between those. The other thing that Poe is interesting for is you can compare. So you can send the same prompt to OpenAI that you send to Anthropic, that you send to Gemini, and see what they come. They each have different flavors. Think about them almost like have personalities. And you can kind of almost get we'll call it a mixture of experts or a best of the brightest is I think a nice comparison. Because if you're writing hey, I want to write an introductory email to this sales prospect, and you kind of see what comes out, you might find that the Anthropic one is one that's more in tune to the way that you want it to be, or you might find the OpenAI one. You don't necessarily know a priori which one's going to be the best. So instead of just defaulting to one, why not try 3? The time that it takes you is, seconds, and then you can start from a better spot. And for me, where I'm using the chat-related AI tools is it's like my rough drafter for everything, whether it's writing a presentation or an email. I never take what comes out of these systems and send it to a client or use it in a presentation, but it starts me out of the point where I can do a relatively minimal amount of editing, some word adding, and then done. Like I have something that I believe is a finished product. And so Poe is just nice because I can try a bunch of different flavors at the same time and see which one fits the best.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other questions from the group? You can also raise your hand and I can unmute you if you would like to verbally ask Brad your question. We'll give folks a moment. No?
Cool.
Always tremendously comprehensive, Brad. Thank you so much. He's our go-to AI person. I'm excited about this event. So we will see Brad again on August 7th from 11:30 to 12:30, and I'm sure he will have even more tidbits for us then. Our next general business webinar is People, Process, and Tools Clarifying Your Talent Strategy. That's geared more towards our tech companies, and that will be on Wednesday, June 12th at noon, and we hope to see you all there virtually. Thank you all again. Thank you so much again to Brad, and I hope you all have a wonderful week.